Welcome back to Stranded in Pittsburgh. You know, last week we really missed all you guys, and I was really excited for the three of us to be back. And Ethan just hit Nate and I with the old "can't do it tonight." Not an ounce of remorse in his voice, but that doesn't matter because Nate and I we're moving up in the world. Nate, some exciting things on your end. I don't want to spend too much time hyping ourselves up, but you've been kind of killing it with the high school hockey coverage and now some new roles at Pittsburgh Sports Now. If you want to hype yourself up a bit or just say I'd rather keep my private matters private, but you're kind of killing it right now, dude.
No, it's exciting. Yeah, doing a lot of stuff, but looking forward to more Pittsburgh Sports Now stuff. Going to be doing some recruiting writing along with the already Army of Ben's basketball writing as we've talked about in previous episodes. So yeah, no, I'm gonna excited for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff there. Pittsburgh Sports Now, a growing media entity in
Hmm.
Pittsburgh region. I wrote there for a bit. We'll throw out some contacts to the people I know and see what can happen. But yeah, I started writing for Yard Barker as well, so you can read
Yeah,
my wonderful piece on why the Steelers should sign Ryan Tannehill because of the Arthur Smith hire. Have a piece on a Pirates pitcher that I think I'm going to write tomorrow, but don't quote me on that. I'm getting over a pretty bad stomach bug, so got to prioritize the 9 to 5 a bit over the other things off hours. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. But anyway, a lot to talk about, including the hiring of Arthur Smith. Uh, Pitt losing an essential piece of their coaching staff on the football side of things, and a lot more to throw at you. But we'll begin with a game that Nate was at yesterday. Actually, we are going to record yesterday, but Nate said, Nick, I got tickets to the Penguins game. That's not going to happen. And despite me acting up in the group chat, obviously, I completely understand why you might want to do that instead of this. But anyway, really nice win for the Penguins yesterday. Saw some special teams, some positives on their end. A nice shutout by Tristan Jarry. We saw an opponent make a hit or have a hit that ended up, we just found out, getting him suspended for 3 games. So quite the eventful game. And although Winnipeg was on a 3-game skid heading into it, some definite positives, some definite things looking up from that performance out of the All-Star break.
yeah, that was a game going in that I was looking for. I made a little prediction of like, okay, this would be a game that you could see the Pens winning 5-1. They need a tone-setting win to start this stretch of games before the trade deadline, and obviously not the score that was predicted, but 3-0, still a very positive outcome. Um, and it started with Chris Letang, who looked like an offensive defenseman that we've seen in the past from himself, jumping up, backhander, nice goal from him to start things off. And then really it came down to that power play. The hit by Brendan Dillon on Noel Acciari, which definitely a touchy hit. Obviously, he received a 3-game suspension, as Nick just mentioned, but it was a dirty hit, but either way, the Pens capitalized where they needed to. And it was funny where I was sitting, there was guys screaming like they're like less passing, more shooting, just screaming it. And they were like getting the whole section to start chanting that. And Penn started throwing pucks at the net, and good things happened. Jeff Carter looked like Patrick Hornquist in front. Then you have Brian Rust tapping in another goal after bounced around a little there behind Hellebuck, who is a very solid goalie in the NHL, potentially going to be a Vezina candidate this year. And the Jets aren't any sort of slouch of a team. I mean, yeah, they were on that losing streak, but that's a good team out west. And the Penguins have found a way to shut out some of the best Western Conference teams. They shut out Vegas, they shut out Colorado, now they shut out Winnipeg. So that also speaks to the goaltending play. Tristan Jarry didn't see a ton of shots in the first 2 periods, and then Winnipeg really brought it in the third. And he just, played his game. He looked really sharp. And then the lone goal that was given up, that was then waved off because of offsides from Mark Scheifele. That was a terrible turnover from Eric Carlson. And he got his pocket picked. Scheifele scores. But other than that, a clean game from Tristan Jarry looked really good. And that's the one thing that we didn't think we'd be talking about the Pens this season. Their goaltending play being so good with Nedeljkovic and Jarry. You'd think the Pens would be scoring 7 goals a game and letting up 5 goals a game, just with the offensive prowess that they have. But it's been a little bit of the opposite. They play I was just reading something from Josh Yohe of The Athletic. They play so much better and in games they score less than, like, 3 goals. Games that they let up, like, 4 or 5 goals, they lose those games all the time, which is crazy because you'd think they'd be able to keep up in a game like that because that's the type of team they're built for, but no, last night was a solid effort from the Pens, and a good way to start this stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of felt like some of the things you've talked about all year kind of came to a forefront last night. The getting a little dirty, getting a little chippy down in front of the net, and it led to good things, as you mentioned. And there's also been some adds to the team's roster, some acquisitions, and then those always present Jake Guentzel trade rumors heated up again over the past couple days. Uh, any thoughts on any of that stuff?
Well, you bring in you talked about the roster additions, so Riley Smith was back, Jesse Puljujarvi, he didn't do a whole lot to stand out, but I think he's a welcome addition to the team. I think he could bring something to this team. Um, Now they have options, and obviously if Noah Chari's out for a little bit, now you're comfortable with some of these guys you have playing, and I think Puljujarvi can start playing well. In terms of Gensel, I mean, I don't know. It's just still such a touchy subject matter because I mean, his name's being thrown out, and the Penguins right now they're 5 points behind the Red Wings and the Maple Leafs for the wild card. Both of those teams tied with 58 points, and they're 5 points behind the Flyers for third place in the Metro. So they're still way on the outside looking in. I think if Gensel gets moved, it's not going to happen until that week or the day of, just because the Pens still have a room for improvement, and I think Dubas is going to wait it out even more. I know he talked about he had that stretch in between whatever the beginning of December to the end of December, and then the stretch leading to the All Star game. So I think he's still in this waiting game. There's going to be a lot of suitors probably for Gensel, especially with him hitting free agency this summer. Because again, not really any deals talked about, but or extensions. But obviously, you would like to keep him in Pittsburgh. I don't know. I'd be okay if they moved on from him because you could get a first rounder or even a second rounder, but also in return still get someone that can play in the NHL, whether that's the second or third line. I think it wouldn't be a bad idea just because Gensel's going to want a lot of money. I mean, he's earned it. He's a guy that can score 40 goals, but I think it's going to come down to that last week. And then also, I know people were saying, I saw something also that someone was saying about Riley Smith reuniting with the Vegas Golden Knights, get him back in Vegas. Because I know there's been some things said that like he hasn't fit well in Pittsburgh in terms of like he hasn't been comfortable. Like maybe he's a little homesick from being away from Vegas because obviously all the success he's had there.
Mhm.
So maybe a reunion with them could be possible, especially because Vegas has a lot of injuries. So I know that name has been thrown around too. So I think Riley Smith and Guentzel, who knows, those two may be potential candidates for trades.
Yeah, Gensel's a difficult situation where he's a fan favorite. His production's usually pretty good. And there's that thing of do you keep him the whole year in hopes that he can make one last run with that big three of Letang, Malkin, and Crosby, and then get nothing for him, assuming he leaves during free agency? Or as you said, do you kind of prioritize the future a bit more and see if you can get an NHL caliber player and then a draft pick or two in addition to it? So I think this is going to be a move that's kind of watched under a microscope, regardless of how it's handled by Dubas. And I think he obviously brought in a lot of fanfare with him when he came over to the Penguins, but I think this is opening the door to a move that's going to be heavily scrutinized. And I'm not sure by which side of the spectrum more so, because I think, as you kind of mentioned too, there's people that are passionately behind moving him and people that are passionately behind keeping him around. So I don't want to be Kyle Dubas. I'm glad I don't get paid that money to do that job.
Yeah, that's a tough choice. I mean, but like we talked about, the good thing is you can get someone that probably can play now while also getting a pick or two because that's what Gensel's value is at right now. So it's a don't want to use that term, but it's kind of a little bit of a win-win situation. You keep Guentzel because he can help your team, but also you move him, you can get someone that can play now and then something for the future.
Absolutely. Penguins' next game is against Minnesota. I believe potentially the last game they may ever play against Marc-Andre Fleury, who notoriously did not get the start for what was likely his last chance to play at Pittsburgh. So that's going to have some good storyline behind it, some eyes on the game. I believe they confirmed Fleury's going to start that one on the Minnesota side. So that's going to make everyone feel old on their, Friday night?
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm going to have some tears in the eyes watching that one. Just kidding. I'm not that dramatic. Anyway, you already know. Penguins Talk, as always, brought to you by Pure Hockey, NHL apparel, hockey equipment. Anything you need related to the ice, Pure Hockey's got it. Hit that link in the description for more. If I'm talking like I don't know where it's going, I have a light pointed at me to help with the lighting in this room, which is terrible, and it is throwing me off every time I get 2 words into a sentence. So I do apologize for that. This is professional production, by the way. We'll move on to the gridiron now. What puts button seats? The Pittsburgh Steelers. Just kidding. Arthur Smith hired as offensive coordinator, and you want to talk about the Jake Guentzel situation having people divided. This has been largely panned by Steeler fans. We heard Tomlin and upper management saying we're going to bring in someone who's going to kind of change speed a bit, kind of bring a new offense in, more dynamic, work in more things, and they go with Arthur Smith, who's been getting clowned on for his entire tenure at Atlanta for not utilizing players like Kyle Pitts and whoever else you want to talk about, basically, in favor of guys who you go, wait, why is he in the game? So there's been a little apprehensiveness from the Steelers side of things, at least from their fans. But this is a guy who's developed a strong run game in Tennessee with Derrick Henry, which then opened up the passing game to help Ryan Tannehill have 2 really good years after what was a very lackluster end to his tenure in Miami. So maybe they're wanting to open that run game more and kind of ease Pickett into a situation that's a little better for him, open up some more play action opportunities, things of that nature, which is a good Tomlinism, things of that nature. So we'll see. The Najee Jalen Warren kind of tandem figuring itself out as this past season went on definitely encourages me that maybe Smith could help bolster that run game even further. But as far as someone who's going to come right in and I think help Pickett develop, I'm not too sure about this one.
Yeah, and I think it obviously didn't meet the expectations that the Steelers fans wanted in terms of the hire because Tomlin had talked about trying to go outside the box and find someone maybe a little bit younger or someone that's going to spice up this offense. And basically, you're going to find an offense that's very similar to last year. Obviously, Arthur Smith's going to bring in his own nuances and and different things to this offense, but I'm going to hold out most judgment on the negative side of things. I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, you got to give him some time. I mean, there wasn't a lot about Matt Canada when he first came in terms of his past. I mean, what he did so well. At least Arthur Smith has a decent track record as an OC when he was with Tennessee, as you mentioned, Nick. Obviously, Atlanta wasn't as appealing to many and why he was disregarded amongst so many people. But I think, this is a big next 2 years for the Steelers in terms of their offensive growth because they have a lot of young pieces. I think that's another thing that we sometimes forget is this team's still young. I mean, they don't have the offensive line where they want it to be. So there's still a lot of room for improvement and growth. And obviously we're going to see the run game probably take another step because that's what he kind of has thrived upon, in his couple positions as of the last couple years. So Jalen Warren, Najee, going to see potentially a step up again because they obviously made strides throughout the year. Passing, yeah. Is it the best for Kenny Pickett's growth and development? Probably not. Um, the Steelers are still holding out hope on Pickett, seeing if he can, regain some confidence that we saw in year one, the fourth quarter play that we saw from Pickett. So I don't know. As you mentioned, I mean, Tannehill played better under him when he was in Tennessee. So I think obviously you look at what he did in Tennessee was great because I mean he had some, first year 10th in scoring, second year was second in scoring points, then second in rush yards, and then 23rd in pass yards in that second season for the Titans under Arthur Smith. So obviously Tennessee did some really good things. The Steelers can do some really good things. They have the weapons, but how do they mix together? So I think that's sort of where you think about now. And the other thing that I liked that hopefully they get Kenny Pickett to do or whoever's at quarterback throw over the middle more. I mean that's something that they've utilized under Arthur Smith. They utilize their tight ends a lot in Atlanta more than a lot of other teams. Now, were they using the right tight ends as you mentioned? Probably not. No, but No, but there's some good and bad to the hire. Obviously, I mean, people are disappointed that it's not one of those young names like Johnson from the Lions and any of those other guys that were thrown around. But Arthur Smith's been around. He's had his ups, he's had his downs. So I'm going to hold off of any negative judgment. I mean, you just got to wait and see because he could come in. First couple games could be really bad, and then the rest of the season they could start to do something really good. So I don't know. I would say it's a reasonable hire for the Steelers. Not
Mhm.
one that fans really wanted, but it's what they got.
Yeah, it's not some name you go, "Who the hell's that?" It's not some random quarterbacks coach from Houston or something. No offense to whoever the Houston quarterbacks coach is. It might have been Gerard Johnson or Jared Johnson. I can't remember what his name was, but I think they interviewed the Texans
Yeah,
quarterback coach actually.
Rod
So my
Johnson.
my bad. But yeah, that was a bad example of a fake person. But yeah, it's a name that people recognize. They have opinions on him, good or bad. But I don't know. We'll see. As you mentioned, passing yards, they were outside the top 20 in Tennessee both years he was their coordinator. But rushing, they were very strong. And then passing touchdowns, they actually finished in the top 10, I believe, both years he was there. And if you've watched Pittsburgh, the passing touchdowns was a big thing. You had the Deontay Johnson drought. You had Kenny Pickett throwing like 2 touchdowns all season. I know it was a little more than that. But I mean, that's a hot topic right there. And if he can find a way, even once they get down to the red zone, to open up that playbook a little more and come up with more scoring plays down close, that's going to be a huge step forward for the Steelers. And that probably goes without being said. But it's an interesting hire. I wasn't too high on it when it first got announced, but we'll see. People keep clamoring for this isn't the Steeler way, the way things are going right now. Well, you want to play smash mouth, run the ball football? This is the guy that's going to help you do that. Maybe the league's past that kind of play by, but we'll see if that's going to be the thing you live or die by. Arthur Smith's going to make it happen. And
Well, I
as
have to.
far as go ahead,
Well, I have to ask. Well, continue that point before I ask you the question I was going to ask.
I was going to say we know he loves tight ends. They got Darnell Washington, the future WWE champion. Darnell Washington, massive man, massive hunk of meat. They've got Connor Hayward. They got Pat Fryermuth. He's got 3 tight ends at his disposal. God, I cross everything that can be crossed that they use Fryermuth because him and Kenny kind of have that rapport. We saw that in the Cincinnati game where he just had a career day out of nowhere. So you hope you see more of Fryermuth over the middle. They keep working that in, but they've got 3 tight ends now that I think he can use, and it should be interesting. We even saw Hayward kind of get worked into the game plan at very, very random points last year on very weird, random plays that almost always had some kind of trickery or a lot of moving parts. So we'll see if there can be a little more coherent usage of him too. Because was he great? No, but be interesting to see what he can do with some more competency behind the plays where he's getting the call.
Yeah, and for Arthur Smith, I mean, there's a lot of options. Just depends on what strings he wants to pull. But my question for you was, you obviously in your first article for Yardbarker, you talked
Oh
about
boy,
Tannehill, so it goes hand in hand. So what I want you to elaborate more on, like why do you think they should bring in or give Tannehill potentially a shot?
I think it's a very safe move in terms of he's going to get a fire under Kenny because he knows Arthur Smith. He's ran in his schemes before. And I think that's what Kenny needs. Is he probably a legitimate threat to take Kenny's job after last year and, his age, the regression we saw this past season? Probably not. But it's going to be a guy where if you're Kenny Pickett, you go, oh, okay, they're bringing in a veteran. Say they draft a rookie too. It can be Hartman from Notre Dame, who did horrendously in the Senior Bowl as far as all the clips I've seen. It could just be a late COVID year merchant that they bring in from college football to see if he can bring that late career success. And I know Sam Hartman was good at Wake Forest too. You get the point. Do they bring in a rookie and they bring in a guy like Tannehill just enough to get Kenny to go, okay, I need to step up my game here. Ryan Tannehill obviously is not the future franchise quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers at his age. That's insane to think. But when you get a guy who has that relationship with the new OC and who has been a proven starter, again on a regression, that's going to light something under Kenny, and that's going to get him to play really well in camp, or falter under the pressure in camp and give them the answer of no, he's not the guy you can trust this team with.
Yeah, and I think that's an intriguing point, all of that discussion, because obviously you'd think Rudolph's not going to be back. He's going to go demand some money on the open market. So I think Tannehill, I mean, you bring him in, that's Arthur Smith's guy. Like that was his guy in Tennessee. So yeah, as you said, that kind of is going to provide that pressure for Kenny, and hopefully that works out. Or you have someone that has proven themselves that they can play in Tannehill, under Arthur Smith especially, and it gives you another option at quarterback. So I mean, very very interesting discussion, and that's a good article that you wrote.
Thank you. And it's the good kind of pressure. They're not taking like a
Yeah,
consensus top 5 quarterback where he's like, "Oh, damn, they're abandoning me and now I'm just going to completely fall apart." You're bringing in a mid late 30s starter who's definitely over the hill, but he's probably got something left in the tank, and again, for the fifth time, that relationship with Smith adds a little more fuel to it. And so I think it's the healthy kind of pressure where he's not going to immediately crumble, but he's also going to recognize, "Okay, they're not joking around. They need to see more out of me."
and the other thing is, true. Kenny Pickett never had a chance to sit behind someone with, something like a Jordan Love behind Aaron Rodgers. Ben was gone. Kenny's sitting behind Mitch Trubisky. What type of track record does he really have and brings to the Steelers for what he's done? Nothing, really. Like Tannehill at least has done a little bit more in his career, so he would be maybe a better veteran option to try and help Kenny Pickett turn things around.
And I mean, Pickett took Trubisky's job. Trubisky went into Pickett's first year, I almost said freshman year, went into his rookie year as the starter and was like, okay, I sat my year out in Buffalo. I watched Josh Allen, which that's kind of reversed him learning from the younger guy, but he worked with some new coaches, sat a year, and now this is his prove it opportunity in Pittsburgh. So you can understand him being a little in terms of, do I want to help Kenny Pickett? So Tannehill's a guy who's seen some things. He got Tom Brady out of New England. He beat him. He beat Tom Brady. Him and Vrabel out Belichick, and they sent him home. That's his last memory as a Patriot. So, I mean, that's a guy who's seen a thing or two, just like Farmers Insurance, I think it is. They know a thing or two
Yeah.
because they've seen a thing or two. So I think he can be the guy to help Kenny Pickett, assuming they bring him in. I know Tannehill had that quote, I think, when Levis took over, like he was pissed off or whatever. But obviously, you're going to say that in that situation because you get hurt and then they go to the rookie and then they don't go back to you. But if you get brought into a team like Pittsburgh, I think you have to know, okay, this is my swan song, but at least I can help this guy out. And if something happens with him, I can step up and seize the moment. Carpe diem.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for Tannehill in Tennessee, like that's his team that he's really found his success with. So this time around, like coming to Pittsburgh, as you mentioned, just would be, you're sort of in that latter stages of your career. You know where you're at right now, and then you're reunited with Arthur Smith. So it could be a good story, good fit for Tannehill in Pittsburgh.
Absolutely. And so that brings up Art Rooney II's comments that were totally contradictory over the last 2 days. So yesterday he tells KDKA they haven't closed any doors in terms of trading for a QB or signing a QB. And then today he tells WTAE a blockbuster deal, some quarterback trade, signing. It's unlikely. So which story is it? I think this kind of encapsulates the just total dismay the Steelers are in. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but we've heard Tomlin kind of contradict himself. Arthur Smith and Tomlin, I can't remember what it was, but I read an article about how they contradicted on the way something went down already. There were multiple things like that towards the end of the season where you were like, didn't someone else just completely disparage those comments and say the opposite happened? And now you have the owner of the franchise saying two totally different songs on 2 different days.
I think they're just at like this. I don't know, not the term maybe to use, but like a midlife crisis right now. They haven't had to deal with this type of quarterback situation in a long time. And I think there's just a lot of weight on their shoulders with Tomlin and Rooney and the front office to not screw up with Kenny Pickett. So I think their words of choice, they're confused. There's confusion because they want Kenny Pickett to perform better and do well, but they don't know if they want to draft someone and say, okay, maybe this guy in the third or fourth round, whoever it may be, if it's a Bo Nix slides all the way down for some reason, or who was the name that just got thrown out? I can't think. I just saw a name that was like in the fourth round from wherever that to
Oh,
come
was it?
in.
Oh, I can't.
I don't
I
know.
don't know his name. Wasn't it Tulane's quarterback though? Maybe
Could have been. There was another one from like a more of a well-known school. I saw it. I don't know where. I don't know. All those mock drafts. But either way,
Spencer Rattler, baby.
who knows? But just like I think they're confused. I think Art Rooney, obviously older guy, I think he's getting confused with what he wants to say. Like I mean, obviously they want their quarterback situation to be better than where it's at. So maybe they don't even know what to
Mhm.
do. Because I mean, at a certain point, they could go for Tannehill, they could go for Cousins, they could go for whoever, Baker Mayfield, who probably will resign in Tampa. But either way, I mean, they're at this like crossroads right now, and I think they're contradicting themselves, but I think that's just how it is right now. They don't know which way they want to go just yet, and there's just a lot of weight on the shoulders. And if the Steelers don't perform well next year, I mean, things could be a lot different, especially with Tomlin. So
Yeah, exactly. I think it's kind of a see where the dominoes fall kind of deal in terms of, well, how much is this guy going to cost us in trade capital? How much space in the cap can we free up this offseason? Who can we get from free agency or what have you? Who's going to be available on what periods of the draft based on what we need versus who's already gone or available? I think there's a lot of variables that are still going to need to be at play. And I think they're trying not to back themselves into a corner promising something and then being called out for abandoning that thought process come April.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just I don't know, just a lot to be discussed, and I don't know. I think the Steelers could potentially draft someone. I think they're more likely to go and draft someone and try to stick with Pickett. And if they re-sign Trubisky or Rudolph or whomever it may be, but obviously they want their guys Kenny Pickett. So I think that's the first and foremost issue within the Steelers is they need him to be better. So that's
Mhm.
why it's such an issue who's in below him because they're already dealing with something at QB1.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure throughout the offseason, we'll continue to hammer these points home over and over again. At home, get a little notepad out, just like this. See how many times we contradict ourselves from where we were the previous week or so. Because I'm sure all of our opinions will be changing throughout the offseason as other moves get made and other things happen throughout the league. But yeah, Super Bowl is this weekend. So, regardless of what you're doing, hope you have fun, stay safe, and enjoy clogging your arteries with moth sticks, jalapeno poppers, your favorite sheets order, whatever you want to do, whether you're going to a party with 50 people or you're sitting alone in your bedroom, which some nights it's better to do that. But yeah, enjoy the big game. And we'll be talking all about it on a late night with Stranded Sports next Sunday or Monday, depending on who we can rally up. Our new show recapping the week in sports in a nice little 20-minute format with myself and former, now returned, stranded on air personality, Tyler Gallo. People like Ethan, Nate, and others will stop by as they can. But yeah, late night stranded sports live stream every Sunday or Monday. Once again, little asterisks. Every one of those nights. Jesus Christ, Nate, this light's really bothering me. But yeah, a lot of fun. We did the first episode last week. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do one. But yeah, really fun first episode. And it's nice to talk in a more laid back setting. There's a lot of pressure. You know how much Pittsburgh fans love their sports. And so every time I babble like an idiot like this, there's just that pressure that they're all booing me in the back of my mind as they're watching. But yeah, so Nate, did you listen to the first episode?
No, I wanted to.
Oh,
I want to hear. I'm sorry. I
no,
know.
you're good. I'm kidding. No one else did.
I'm a disappointment to the brand, but no, I want to see how Tyler sounds. Be
Oh
interesting
yeah,
to see him back in the fold. But I'm sure I'll hop on eventually to an episode soon, so
for
get to
sure.
talk with him regardless.
So we'll move over now to the other side of Acrisure Stadium, Pitt football. Longtime D-line coach Charlie Partridge departing. It was a second stint, excuse me, with the Panthers. It sounds like he's turned down a lot of other offers before. I believe Alabama and maybe Florida was interested. He obviously also spent time at FAU before he came back to the Steelers, and it sounds like he's had NFL interest before. Again, I'm not the biggest Pitt football fan, but just reading up on things and from what I've watched over the last couple years, uh, he's one of the most coveted pieces of Narduzzi's coaching staff, an associate head coach along with the D-line coach. He's had all kinds of talent come through there that he's responsible for. And this is a big loss, especially as Pitt's kind of forming this new identity. We saw them bring in Cade Bell, who had a presser today. Uh, Talked about how much they're going to use Gavin Bartholomew, which should be a no-brainer. But as we've mentioned with the Arthur Smith jokes there, it's never a given what tight end's going to be used, I guess. But so that was nice to see him talk. We can dive into that a little bit later or next week, uh, assuming the Steelers aren't dominating the news cycle again. But yeah, so a big loss for Pitt as they're trying to establish what this team's going to be moving forward with some new faces in the ACC as well. Nate, how can you kind of summarize the impact this loss is going to have at this stage of the offseason?
Well, when you lose a guy like Charlie Partridge, you don't want to say the sky's falling, but who knows? I mean, that is one of your biggest recruiters on your staff. I've seen people say that these Pitt teams the past couple of years, maybe not this past season with how bad they were, but those championship teams, they might have not have been where they were without Charlie Partridge because he has brought in a lot of tremendous talent. He has put a lot of tremendous talent in the league into the NFL. Look at Kalijah Cansey, a first round pick by the Bucks this past year. Several All Americans with Patrick Jones and Rashad Weaver and Cansey and among others. So this is a big one. I mean, he continually brought in, when you look around, and I know for Pitt, stars don't matter because they've developed guys who have been 2 stars, like Servassier Dennis and other guys, where they're under recruited. But he was a guy, Partridge, that constantly brought in 4 stars into this Pitt program on the D line and did a really good job bringing in Whippeal products and Elliot Donald and Dorian Ford and Nakai Johnson and Dagon Hayes. And this one's big because like he was Narduzzi's guy to go out and recruit. And I don't know who the replacement's gonna like who they plan on bringing in to replace him, but you're not gonna be able to do that with a guy like Partridge leaving. And I mean, think about that stretch of years they were top 5 in sacks for like 3 straight years in the NCAA. I mean, those were just some unbelievable numbers. And the production that he was able to produce out of his D lineman, second to none. So this is a pretty difficult one for Pitt. And like you mentioned, I mean, he was pursued by a lot of other schools in the past for good reason. I mean, he's a good coach. And you gotta I mean, it just is a testament to his loyalty though, that he stayed in Pittsburgh for so long. And it finally took until obviously a good deal with the Colts to go and coach in the NFL because I mean, you don't want to pass up an opportunity like that to go coach in the NFL, get more money. But I mean, he was loyal to Pitt for a long time. And you talked about Florida, yeah, I believe was in the mix like 2 years ago. There was some rumors, or even at the end of last year, I think it was. But it's a tough one because that was their calling card on defense for so many years. I mean, their defensive backs have been good, for several years now under Narduzzi because that's sort of, he loves those one-on-one isolation, put them on an island type of defensive backs. But the D line is really what thrived over the past couple of years. Past whatever it was, 2017 was when Partridge came in, and it really took off. That was their staple. I mean, when you played Pitt, you had to worry about their D line sacking you 4, 5, 6 times. So it's a tough one for Pitt to swallow.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at the statistics that those teams had under him, and it was impressive. You rattled them off there, but reading it all when those articles explaining his departure, it was impressive to see that kind of run he went on, like a Jordan Bulls-esque run in terms of the production of that D line over a very long span of time. I believe also Noah Hiles, I believe, tweeted it out that 8 of the last 12 4-star or better recruits Pitt had Partridge helped recruit, which is an insane number.
Yep.
You don't need me to tell you that, but this is something that, as you kind of touched on too, you're not going to find someone who immediately slots on in and replaces his production that he has, the leadership that he had, the impact on recruiting he had, getting the most out of his players the way he could. You have to find someone who I guess can hold a candle to it, but that's not someone you're going to replace in 1 year in. That's going to have to be developed over time to have someone replace what an integral part of this team he was.
Yeah, and it's already been such a big year of turnover for Pitt and Pat Narduzzi. And this one, it's just more salt in the wound for them, with Partridge being the one to leave. Like, obviously, wasn't let go. Good thing I will say it's a good thing he didn't stay in college and go somewhere else because that would have hurt way worse for Pitt.
Mm.
But, I mean, obviously, it's better for Partridge to go move into the NFL. Yeah, I don't know who can replace that type of production. I mean, there were so many 4 stars on the D line or guys of that nature that people were transferring because they weren't getting playing time because they were 4 stars and, the whole thing feeling they should be playing and whatnot. But, I mean, it was just a typical cycle of bringing in 4-star guys for Partridge and that D line. So, we'll see. We'll see who can come in and see if they can replace that production because I mean, next year's team, you don't know what you're gonna get with that team. Like this year coming in, you had a feeling what you could get and then everything unraveled. But like next year, there's just so much new going on. Nate Yarnell has been pinpointed as the quarterback who is expected to be QB1 going into spring training camp, which is interesting and makes sense though. But like
Mhm.
there's so many unknowns for this Pitt team, and now that adds Partridge to that list.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a weird offseason. This move has some people kind of doing the doomsday scenario, but you have to wait it out. I mean, again, to go back to the offense, which I know this conversation's been largely defensively driven and obviously so, but Cade Bell has a really good track record. He got some guys to stay along to see what he can do with them. You bring in an Alabama quarterback and Eli Holstein. Whether or not he's actually going to get tapped in as the starter over Yarnell once camp starts, that remains to be seen. But offensively, you're starting to figure out some of those problems. And now defensively, you have something unravel kind of out of the blue. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens over these next couple of months. And obviously, with the football season, off season, excuse me, being so young, Pitt and the Steelers both kind of drawing some parallels to each other where there's some moves being made. And all we can really do is speculate and say, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But there is no debating that it is now time for last call, Nate. Check this out. Yeah.
That's
Don't you like
awesome.
that? Don't you like that?
It's making me thirsty.
Isn't it? After listening to me, you deserve a few of those. But anyway, Nate, it's last call. What do you got for us?
Well, I'll go first because I think I'm doing some speculating, but I think you have something that's completely different from what my last call is going to be. I'm
That's a
sticking in
safe bet.
I'm sticking in sports with something that has been surprisingly brought up in for the Penguins. Sidney Crosby has been thrown into the negative spotlight a couple times as of late. He was ripped apart a little bit because he didn't show up to the NHL All-Star draft and he was out on the outdoor rink in Montana during that time. And I know there were some choice words about that on, some publications, but I want to go lean towards TSN's Brian Hayes made some comments in the past 2 weeks about they need to get Sidney Crosby out of Pittsburgh, which I think is unfathomable that you can even talk about that. And part of the whole discussion is he needs to get out of there. It's a train wreck. He needs to go win another cup before he's done, which I think is bogus because this isn't one of those players that has never won anything and you want to go get him a ring before he's done. That's not one of these scenarios. This is a guy who's won 3 cups, been to 4 Stanley Cups in Pittsburgh. He's done everything he has done here. He's going to ride this one out until his legs fall off. Because and the funny thing is the way people are talking, they're acting like the Pens are out of it. Like the Pens are only a handful of points out of a playoff position. They're not playing great hockey, but Crosby's obviously still playing at an elite level, and part of the reason why they think he needs to get traded somewhere so he can continue that play and win another championship. But that is never going to happen. And the quote that Brian Hayes brought up was, he needs to follow in the footsteps of Tom Brady. This is not the NFL. This is not Tom Brady. This is Sidney Crosby, one of the most loyal hockey players in the entire NHL. He's never going to leave Pittsburgh. He's never going to ask for a trade. Obviously, his contract's coming up, and that's his decision if he wants to leave after his contract expires. But you'd have to imagine he's probably going to get an extension and stay in Pittsburgh because this is where he got drafted. This is where he's won so much. And they got the band back together with Letang, Malkin, and Crosby so they can do it together. He's not going to jump ship at the last second and try to win somewhere else. That's just not going to happen. So just really, really bogus comments from
Mhm.
TSN and from Canada. It's just because they're upset probably that Canada hasn't won a cup in what, 30
Oh, no.
years? And they want Sid to go win in Montreal or wherever else they want him. So that's my last call.
I like it, Nate. I like it. It's not like a Connor McDavid situation where you're like, is he ever going to win with these guys? Like, what's he doing here?
He might.
But
They just had their 16-game win streak snapped by
I was
Vegas.
going to
Didn't
say
touch the
they're
Pens.
doing well
Yeah.
this year, so that's maybe a bad example at this point. But the
Well,
last few years,
they were really bad to start though. They were awful,
Mhm.
but they've turned it around and almost touched the Pens 17-game win streak that is the NHL record, but didn't get it. Vegas stopped them.
Those Golden Knights, baby. Anyway, Nate was right. I wasn't going to talk about Sidney Crosby being slandered in the media for skating on a pond and not ring chasing. Something that's definitely in his character is to go ring chase. But yeah, I'm going to talk about someone else who's old, nearing the end of their career. But damn it, I can't stop watching him. And that's Tiger Woods. Uh, Tiger Woods announced today he's playing in the Riviera, which I believe is this weekend, next weekend, or I'm totally wrong on that. So my apologies. But the joy I get seeing Tiger Woods is going to play is something that I cannot put into words. I can't articulate it well. I can't write it down well. I can't really describe what it's like to watch Tiger Woods on the golf course. When you're growing up and you're from the Pittsburgh area, granted, I was 2 hours north of Pittsburgh, but you sit down and little Nick's sitting there with his bright red hair, a lot redder than this, and your dad tells you, we're rooting for Pittsburgh teams, Nick. You're rooting for the Pirates, you're rooting for the Steelers, you're rooting for the Penguins. You don't get to go cheer on the greatest. You don't get to cheer on Tom Brady. He's the guy you root against. You don't get to cheer on LeBron James. He plays for Cleveland. Granted, Pittsburgh doesn't even have a basketball team. You still can't root for Cleveland or LeBron, the best in the world, because no, we're Pittsburgh people. You can't do that. But you know what you do when you turn on golf? You can root for whoever the hell you want to. There's no regional allegiances in golf. And the best player in the world was Tiger frickin' Woods. And so I loved Tiger Woods. And now, even as he nears 50, there's something about watching him. And he's got rods in his legs and he's a lot slower than he used to be. But damn it, if you don't turn on that tournament to watch Tiger and see what he's going to do, even at a course he hasn't done well at, like the Riviera, it still can't miss TV. If you want anyone to watch golf who's a little on the fence, you show them Tiger Woods and just the aura he has. That's a big thing on social media now. Oh, bro has no aura. Tiger Woods has all the aura. And it's incredible to watch a tournament with him going. The 2019 Masters behind all of the Pittsburgh team's championships is one of the greatest things I've ever watched in live time on television. Is absolutely incredible. I don't remember if he teed off early or if I just woke up late during my college career, so it felt earlier than normal. But I remember waking up my roommate saying, Tiger's teeing off. He's going to be in contention. We got to watch this. And we watched Tiger Woods play the entire 2019 Masters together. It was an incredible moment. He is that polarizing of a figure in the golf world. And with all the Live, PGA, did they merge? Did they not merge? Who knows what's happening? I'm not a lawyer. Conversation. It feels like a lot of the talk about the golf landscape has not been about the golfers itself. It's been about what's going on with this Saudi-backed league versus what's going on with the PGA and all of their pals. But when you get Tiger Woods on the golf course, all that other BS stops, and you just sit and you watch. He's also not going to be with Nike. Interesting. The first time ever we're going to see Tiger Woods play without the Nike sponsorship, the Nike red, on a Sunday, assuming he makes it to Sunday, which isn't meant to be grim, but it's what's his body going to be capable of. But I'm just excited, in case you couldn't tell. Seeing Tiger Woods on a golf course, knowing he's kind of nearing the end, don't tell him that, though. It's something that makes me feel like a kid again every single time. Tom Brady's out, Peyton Manning's out, LeBron's nearing the end, Sidney Crosby's nearing the end, but damn it, you turn on Tiger and you feel like a kid again. Him and Sid the Kid, both the last few years, have just made me say, you may be 25 now, but there's still 11, 12-year-old Nick down there geeking out every time one of them does something crazy. So I'm going to go cry now.
You're making it all sentimental.
I do that very well.
closing that chapter on our childhood heroes. It's coming to an end, man.
You're damn right. You're damn right, Nate. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. Anything else you got there?
No, that's I will say I don't know how much I'm gonna tune into that golf because I've never been super into it, but about 2 years ago, I started watching a little bit more, surprisingly, and then it's tapered off, so maybe you have to send me when Tiger's teeing off, and maybe I'll be like your roommate, and we'll, watch from our own homes, the comfort of our own homes, but
Not together, but
share that bond. We'll share that bond of watching Tiger tee off.
we'll see. We'll see, Nate. And I think so. That is next week. I just checked. He teased something on his Instagram that something's coming February 12th. So that is before this tournament. So I'm going to assume that's going to be his new clothing sponsor.
Mhm.
I think I've heard a lot of it being tailor-made, which would make sense. I think he did something with a lot of tailor-made influencers. But now that I say that, they make clubs more than apparel. I know they have their hats and whatnot, so he'll probably wear hats. But I don't know if they make polos and pants and all that at TaylorMade. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm not here to debate what Tiger Woods is wearing. I'm not a reporter, caring what people are wearing on the red carpet or on the 18 green. Anyway, this has been Stranded in Pittsburgh. Thanks for tuning in. I promise I'm not going to talk like I just had a stroke next week, which is a big promise to make, considering if you've ever listened to the show before, that's never a